Okay, so this next lesson of the ecology unit is on nutrient cycles. So it says here the cycles of life. Everything on Earth that has existed since the beginning of time has been getting recycled over and over and rearranged into other forms of compounds and structures. This is what we call a cycle. A biogeochemical cycle is the cycling of matter or nutrients through the biotic and abiotic environment. In nutrient cycles, decomposers digest waste materials. These substances then enter the soil, water, and air as nutrients. So keep in mind, guys, it says here biogeochemical cycle. So keep in mind, bio means life. And biogeochemical cycle means the cycling of essential elements of living matter through the biosphere. So we're going to talk specifically about the water cycle and the carbon cycle. And we're going to learn that these nutrients are almost like recycled and reused over and over and over again. Okay, so we're going to see how something like carbon is taken, broken down, recycled, reused, broken down, recycled, and reused. I just want to point out here it says, in nutrient cycles, decomposers, so I'll just underline that there, digest waste materials. So we learned a little bit about decomposers in the roles lesson, and it's important to remember that decomposers can break down dead plant and animal materials. So when these decomposers break down this material, the dead plants and animals are made up of a whole bunch of nutrients. So when they die and then they decompose, these nutrients are then able to enter the cycle again through the soil, the water, and the air. So through our different spheres, the lithosphere, the hydrosphere, the atmosphere. And these nutrients that were taken from these dead plants and animals can then be recycled and reused over and over again. And then the last thing I want to say here, and I know I mentioned this already a little bit, but when dead plants and animals are broken down by composers, like I said, like they're going to be broken down into what those organisms were made up of. So living things, including us, were made up of nitrogen, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. Okay, so these organisms are broken down into this, and then these nutrients are re-enter the lithosphere, hydrosphere, atmosphere, and they are recycled. Okay, so first we'll start with the water cycle. So it says water collects in the ground where it seeps into water beds like lakes, streams, ponds. This water is then evaporated and collected in clouds. Living organisms also release water through something called transpiration and respiration, breathing out from animals. This water also collects in the clouds. The clouds then release this water as precipitation, rain, and snow, and the cycle continues over again. So I just want to bring us back to this term here of transpiration. Okay, so it's saying that organisms release water. So through a process called transpiration, trees and plants are able to release water through their leaves or roots or stems. So that's one way that water is released. And then if you remember from our energy note, when we learned about cellular respiration, we learned that one of the products of cellular respiration is water. So that's another way that water is released and then collected in the clouds. So we're going to see these steps over again in this diagram here, and we'll go over that process one more time together. So the water cycle is like a continuous cycle. So let's just start over here. Okay, you can start really anywhere, guys. It's a cycle. It happens over and over again. You're going to connect to the same spot eventually. So let's go over here. So because of heat energy from the sun, okay, water from the lakes and streams evaporates. So it turns from liquid form to gas form and then enters the atmosphere, so up here, as water vapor, so in the clouds. So just to give you guys an example, just like if you were to accidentally leave a glass of water on your porch in the summer, well, eventually the water level will get lower and lower and lower because of evaporation. So that liquid evaporating and turning into a gas. So the same thing is happening here. So heat energy from the sun causes water to evaporate and turn to water vapor, which now it's in the atmosphere and in the clouds. And then eventually as water vapor builds up and it returns back to the lithosphere, which is our Earth's rocky portion, so like the ground and the soil, and it returns back to the hydrosphere, so like our lakes and oceans, and it returns back as rain and snow, so almost like liquid form again. Okay, so precipitation occurs, that water vapor, the gas form of water, turns back to the liquid form. It then comes back down to the ground, which is the lithosphere, and our lakes and streams, which is the hydrosphere. And then the water joins in with the ground and the soil. It runs off into lakes and streams. And then the cycle repeats itself. So it's like the recycling of water molecules over and over again. The water doesn't just disappear, okay? It's recycled over and over again. Okay, and then the process just happens again. All right. Okay, the next cycle that we're going to talk about is the carbon cycle. So it says here, carbon is a unique element and is central to the existence of life. All organisms need it. It is a building block of life. Most of the atmospheric carbon dioxide results from respiration or from the burning of fossil fuels, oil, gasoline. So the carbon cycle is the continuous recycling of carbon. And it's important to note that living things are all made up of carbon. So I mentioned this earlier, like the major macromolecules that make us up are like fats and proteins, carbs, amino acids, and all of these macromolecules contain carbon. So we are made up of carbon, and we're going to see in the future slides how those nutrients are recycled and reused. Down here we see this diagram of photosynthesis. So this is kind of like a quick reminder. Photosynthesis is when plants take light energy from the sun, water, which it absorbs from its roots or from the soil, and carbon dioxide that's in the atmosphere combined in the plant cells to make oxygen and sugar, or the sugar was also known as glucose. Okay, so this photosynthesis is an example where carbon is being taken out of the atmosphere. So plants take it out of the atmosphere and they use it to create this glucose that we spoke of. That's one way that the carbon is taken out of the atmosphere, but then there's multiple ways in which it's returned to the atmosphere. So it says here, most results from respiration. So we learned that the opposite reaction, the cellular respiration, the product of that is carbon dioxide. So just from breathing, living, all organisms are releasing carbon dioxide. So that's where carbon is released back to the atmosphere. And then we also do a lot of burning of fossil fuels to make oil and gasoline. So like different factories and that sort of thing are burning fossil fuels. And when fossil fuels are burned, carbon is also released into the atmosphere. So this is just again to show there's some ways that carbon is taken out, but then it's returned, and it's like a cycle and it goes over and over and over again. Okay, and then again, this is just another diagram showing, you know, the different things that we've been talking about. So if we start, say, over here, okay, it's showing that plants take the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere because they need carbon dioxide for photosynthesis to occur to create their own food. And remember, photosynthesis is so important. All of us living things get our energy originally from plants, right? Plants take energy from the sun, they use the light energy, and then they create this chemical energy that we then go and eat in order to survive. So it's very important. And then animals and plants, so we see here animals and plants, release the carbon back into the atmosphere because of respiration. So we perform cellular respiration in order to survive. So our body can carry out all of those life processes to eat, breathe, move, digest. And so through cellular respiration, the carbon is released back into the atmosphere. Down here, you'll see decaying matter and waste. So dead plants and animals break down over time. Decomposers break them down. And then over time, this dead matter becomes fossil fuels that are then burned. Okay, so over here, we can say carbon is released back into the atmosphere when fossil fuels are burned. So again, taken out through photosynthesis, returned through the breakdown of dead matter that then becomes fossil fuels and is burned. It's released back and then also released back through cellular respiration. Okay, and then you guys have practice worksheets in your booklet on pages 12 to 13.